Welcome to Chapter 4, Part 3, Fungal Cells. Yeasts are round to oval shape. They have asexual reproduction, and they also will bud off of each other. And I'll explain that in a picture coming up. Hyphae are the long thread-like cells found in the bodies of filamentous fungi. And then if it's a chain of yeast cells, it's referred to as a pseudohypha. So this should look familiar if you've ever left anything in the refrigerator for too long. A little bit of mold growing there. And then this is an example of budding yeast where it's budding off of each other and grows these little arms that end up, they'll end up the same size as the original cell there. So there's nearly 300 species of fungi that can cause human disease. The three main types: community acquired by environmental pathogens, hospital associated infections in the clinical setting, and then of course opportunistic infections caused by low virulence species that infect immunocompromised patients. So low virulence means, generally speaking, they don't easily cause disease normally. So they're going to take advantage of those weakened defenses. An example of that is AIDS patients tend to get fungal infections. So fungal cell walls give off chemical substances that can cause allergy attacks or trigger allergies. So if you've ever cleaned out the basement of a house that's been damp, or been around, something that's kind of been damp and have some mold growing, when you're cleaning it up or it disturb that mold, that can cause some allergy response, as well as other things. There are toxins produced by poisonous mushrooms that can induce neurological disturbances and even death. And then specifically Aspergillus flavus, it has the ability, this is a type of fungus, it has the ability to synthesize a poison called aflatoxin. Sorry, I'm having a moment today. Potentially lethal to animals that happen to eat it if their grain is contaminated with it. So a number of species are pathogenic to corn and grain as far as fungi, and that will reduce the crop production and cause disease in domestic animals. Fungi is also responsible for rotting fresh produce during shipping and storage. For example, just bought some strawberries this week, and as you know, you can't leave them sitting on the counter for very long because they will rot very quickly, and that is due to, in many cases, having a little bit of fungus on them. Benefits of fungi. So keep in mind, while there's some bad things about it, there's also some good things. They play an essential role in decomposing organic material and returning minerals to the soil. So that's an important thing. Like in the woods, you see things, old trees being broken down, and among other things, fungus may be part of that. Fungi has been engineered to produce large quantities of very important things in our society, such as antibiotics, alcohol, organic acids, and also vitamins. Some fungi, mushrooms, are eaten to provide flavoring are eaten or used to provide flavoring to food. So a couple things for the fungal nutrition, if you just know these as terminology. So heterotrophic, they acquire nutrients. A heterotrophic fungus acquire nutrients from a wide variety of organic substances. Saprobes or saprobic fungus, these substrates from the remnants of dead plants and animals in soil or aquatic habitats. All right, so this is written weird, so let me just clarify this. A saprobic fungal, a fungus that is saprobic, obtain their nutrition from the remnants of dead plants and animals in the soil or aquatic habitats. Sorry, there's a little bit of a typo there, and I didn't catch that before. So, parasitic funguses will grow on the bodies of living animals or plants, and although very few require a living host. So fungus can actually grow on dead things, is what that's saying. Morphology is a word we say when we're saying the physical characteristics and arrangements, so what it looks like and how it's laid out on, in any given spot. So cells of most microscopic fungi grow in loose associations or colonies. The colonies of yeast are much like bacteria, and they have a soft, uniform texture and appearance. And colonies of filamentous fungi are noted for the striking, cottony, hairy, or velvety texture. So mycelium, the woven intertwining mass of hyphae that makes up the body or colony of a mold. A septa is the nature of the septa, varies from solid partitions with no communication between the compartments to walls with small pores that allow for organelles and nutrients to be passed back and forth. The reproductive or fertile hyphae produce spores, and this is not to be confused with the term endospore. So we're talking about fungi here and not endospores. So remember that fungi can release spores, which is a way for them to spread their selves around, basically. We're going to talk more about that coming up here. So most fungi can propagate by the outward growth of existing hyphae or by fragmentation. So when we talk about the spores, this is the primary reproductive mode of fungi. Notice how I made that bigger and bolded it and kind of underlined fungi. So primary reproductive mode of fungi. How do these spores make their way around? Okay, how do they how does the fungi reproduce? Well, it produces by the air, in the water, and by living things. So it will germinate upon finding a happy place, a favorable substrate. So wherever it lands, if it's a good spot, then it will start to germinate and grow more mold in a fairly short time. So this is just an illustration of what I've talked about. All right, so more on asexual spore formation. I have trouble with these terms, so bear with me here. Sporangiospores. These are formed by successive cleavages within a sac-like head called a sporangium, which is attached to a stalk. The conidiospores are free spores. They're not enclosed by a sac. So basically for this one, just remember these, just treat these like terminology and know the difference between the two. More on sexual spore formation. So mixing of DNA from two parent fungi creates offspring with combinations of genes different from that of the parent, which is a good thing. It's as noted here, it's an advantageous adaptation. So depending on how they reproduce, the mixing, when the option comes up or when it happens with certain types, if it's two parent fungi creating offspring with combinations of genes from the different parents, then that can make it a little bit of a stronger generation, we'll say. Sexual spores vary from simple fusion of fertile hyphae to of two different strains, or a complex union of male and female structures. So this is switched over to the idea of sexual spore formation versus asexual. Asexual is when it just kind of blows around or flows around out in the water or whatever. Sexual formation is a whole different process. All right, so that's the end of fungi. So we're going to stop there, and we'll pick up on protozoa in the next installment, which is part 4.